Hey guys, MJ here. So this next video is somewhere very special to us. It's a different kind of trip. But first question, when you think of summer vacation, what do you normally think of? If you're like my family, you think of the beach, right? Somewhere warm. So this one, we wanted to plan something a little different this year, in part because my kids are getting older. They're going to be out of the house soon. Not sure how much longer we're all going to be taking vacations as a family of four. And so also because last year on vacation, my husband said it was too hot. So I literally started planning this trip last year on vacation on the way home. So, like I say, never start too early. It's never too early to start, and plan, right? So, like I said, this is a little different. It's great. I've got lots of tips for you. And so without further ado, this trip is about Wyoming.
So we flew into Bozeman, Montana, and this was our view driving down from Bozeman into Idaho. That's where our Airbnb was. And as we're driving, seeing the snow-capped mountains just made it really exciting. Just beautiful country. And this is our Airbnb we rented in Victor, Idaho. It's 2-bedroom, 2-bath, very spacious inside. The living room, kitchen was beautiful. Hot tub out back, multiple porches, great view. I highly recommend. It's just less than a minute off of the main road in Victor, and we chose this location because it was close to Jackson, Wyoming. If you drive over the Teton Pass to Jackson, it was just about 35 minutes or so to Jackson, and then we had planned our trips to Grand Teton and Yellowstone from there. And like I said, I'll talk more about that in a minute, but we chose an Airbnb just to have a little bit more room rather than staying in a hotel. If you're interested in checking out the Airbnb that we stayed in, this is it, Mustang Meadows in Victor, Idaho. So just look it up on the Airbnb app or on their website. And like I said, I highly recommend, and the host was great. On our first day there, we went to Jackson, Wyoming. And like I said, it's about a 35-minute drive over the Teton Pass from Victor, Idaho. If you'd rather stay in a hotel in Jackson, that's fine too. We just kind of wanted a little bit more privacy in our Airbnb, and we didn't mind the drive. Now, keep in mind, the time of year that you visit this area is very important. I did a lot of research and decided that early June, would be the best for weather-wise and crowds. If you go later in July and August, you're going to encounter more people. And if you go earlier than late May, early June, you may encounter snow, and Teton Pass may be closed. So they do have a few different roads in the area that do not open until at least mid-May. So keep that in mind. But Jackson Hole was just great. Cute little shops, some restaurants. Jackson Drug was great. We had a bison burger, and their huckleberry shakes really good. Cowboy Coffee, that's a great place. Of course, I had to have iced coffee, and that's a great place to stop for that. Just a day to walk around and go in the little shops. It's just a neat place to be. For most of the trips that I plan for our family, I like to throw in a few surprises, and for this one of the surprises was tickets to the Jackson Hole Rodeo, and it was a great time. I'm so glad that I did that. I didn't tell them until we got to our Airbnb what we were doing. So we went to the Jackson Hole Rodeo the evening of after we had visited downtown Jackson. So it worked out. We just kind of stayed in town, went to the rodeo, and they really put on a good show. I highly recommend it. We'd been to rodeos before, but something different about this one. I don't know if it was because it was actually in the West, real cowboys, but it was great. It was a great time. Now, before you go to Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks, I highly recommend you get the Guide Along app. It's free to download in the App Store, but you do have to purchase the tour for Yellowstone and Grand Teton. It's a bundle pack, but I think it was only like $19.99. It's very useful. The narrator, it uses GPS, and the narrator tells you different places to stop based on where you are. It tells you a lot of background information and history on the area, and tells you places that you can skip if you don't have time, if you're in a hurry, and definitely tells you some tips on parking and things like that. So it is very neat, and I will be using this app again because it has different tours for other places in the US. So again, highly recommend you get this and start it before you start your drive into Grand Teton. Okay, we took one day for Grand Teton. We left kind of early in the morning, and we started the app that I just talked about, and it gave us a few different stops to make. The views are just magnificent. This is the Chapel of Transfiguration. It's definitely a great stop. Jenny Lake is another wonderful stop. It's just a short walk down to the water. You can also ride a boat across to see the waterfalls. But we didn't do that. We used a spotting scope. I bought my husband a spotting scope for his birthday, and we took that with us, and he and the kids both enjoyed looking at wildlife and things like that through that. So that was a neat thing to do. There's a lot of great spots along the way. Like I said, Jackson Lake Dam was a great place to stop for lunch. We had a picnic lunch. That's another good tip, I must say. There aren't very many places to stop for food. There's basically just the visitor center. So you want to either pack some things or get some things there before you get back on the road. We took drinks. We had one of the little cooler bags, and I had ice and drinks, and made some sandwiches and chips, that kind of thing. So it was just nice to stop and have a little picnic lunch and then just continue on our drive. Some other great places were the Mormon Row, definitely a stop to make. We visited the John Moulton Barn, got some really great pictures of that, and that's also where we had some family photos taken. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but it's a great, beautiful backdrop. So lots of good stops for that. But I would say allow a day. And if you get the app, he'll be very helpful to explain to you the stops that maybe are not necessary. You know, if you want to do it in a day, probably can't make every stop, but definitely most of them you can see. Okay, another surprise that I planned without telling the crew was to have family photos taken. Actually, my daughter knew, but we were the only ones. We had planned the outfits, and she and I both had hats that we were going to wear with our dresses, and it was so neat because we just thought the guys would not wear hats. They didn't really have hats that they had taken, but they ended up finding some hats in Jackson, Wyoming, when we were there shopping. And so a couple of days later, I surprised them and told them we were getting family photos taken. And they were like, oh, we're going to wear new hats. And I'm so glad that it turned out that way. I think it really made the pictures. Such a beautiful backdrop. We hadn't had any family photos taken in a while, so I was glad that I took advantage of this wonderful scenery. And our photographer was Molly Cross Photography. She's out of Colorado, and she actually made the trip up to the Tetons. She had a few other clients that week, but I contacted her about 5 months in advance and scheduled that. So you want to allow plenty of time for that. But I highly suggest, if you're making the trip out to this beautiful place, that you plan to have some professional photos taken. One of the reasons I wanted to stay in this area was to be able to see two national parks. And Yellowstone was the second one, and definitely leave early for this one. We were staying south in Idaho, as I mentioned, and so we drove through Grand Teton and then up to Yellowstone. Left early, took some food with us. We took the lower loop, and the Guide Along app is really going to be helpful for this park as well. You can choose which direction to go, and he will tell you different tips based on that, stops and different parking lots that you should use, and so on. And if you take the lower loop and make a left, one of the first stops that you'll want to do is Old Faithful. And this is the Old Faithful Inn. While you're waiting on Old Faithful to erupt, it erupts, I believe, every 45 minutes or so. You'll want to take a short walk down to the Old Faithful Inn and take a look at the architecture in there. It is beautiful. It's just something to see for sure. And then take your seat to see Old Faithful erupt, and that is just an experience like no other. Now, there's no cell service in Yellowstone, which I love, but you'll want to just look out the window, put your phones down, and look for wildlife. You'll see a lot of bison, sometimes right in the middle of the road, so be careful. We saw moose, a couple of moose, deer, elk, lots of things to see. It's just beautiful scenery. Now, the next stop, big stop you'll want to make is the Grand Prismatic Spring. There are two parking lots for this. We took the second parking lot, finally found a parking space, and walked up the boardwalk close to the springs. There's a few there that you can look at, including the Grand Prismatic up at the top. But if you take the first parking lot, it's an overview for the spring, which makes a lot prettier pictures. So I kind of wish we would have done that, but I also liked being really close up to it. So one of the must stops is the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone. It is magnificent. It will just take your breath away. There's a nice parking lot there. Short walk to a couple of different viewpoints. This was my favorite. We spent quite a bit of time there. Is just a beautiful sight. As I said, driving through the park, you'll just see beautiful places that you want to pull off and take a picture of. And also, as I said, you'll have bison in the road sometimes. This one looked like he was getting ready to ram into the car in front of us. We stopped at a few more geysers on the way back and a few more beautiful sights along the road to take pictures. And just looking at the scenery, it just amazed me, the differences between the two parks. You have the Grand Teton, which were formed by glaciers, and then Yellowstone, which is basically the top of a volcano with the geysers and all that. And they're so close together, yet two totally different landscapes. But all in all, it's just amazing, beautiful country. I did plan another activity that we did not get to do. We were going to raft on the Snake River through Barker Ewing float trips. The Teton Pass, it was closed. They had a slide. It was on the national news. And we were not able to get over to our raft trip that I had scheduled. I had scheduled that a few months in advance as well. We weren't able to get over there in time for that. So, but Barker Ewing float trips, they were really great about giving me our money back. So I hope to maybe one day get back out there and possibly do that. But all in all, it was a great week. A lot of great stops, beautiful scenery, trip of a lifetime, and one that we will not forget.